Welcome over to Automotive World, everyone. I'm your host, Vinny Mystery, and we are back. We have another great sales report out of Mazda. We're going to go through all the numbers here, but Mazda is having a pretty good year right now. Their total sales were, as of right now, for April, 31,125 vehicles. That is a slight decrease at 3.8% compared to April 2023. However, their year-to-date sales are up at over 131,000 vehicles. That's up 8.5%. And right now, Mazda is also killing it right now with not only a lot of their new vehicles being sold, but their CPO program being the Certified Pre-Owned program. So their Certified Pre-Owned sales are also up 28% compared to April 2023 at 6,294 vehicles. And Mazda on the SUVs had some best ever sales. For the CX-30, best ever April sales with 7,649. Also another best ever April sales with the CX-50. 5,225. Really interesting to see that. And we also had another best ever April sales for the CX90 at 3,694. And like I said, another second best April sales for Mazda's Certified Pre-Owned program. So Mazda is killing it with these three vehicles up here brand new, but they are also killing it in the Certified Pre-Owned department. So Mazda dealers, you're in a great place right now. You're in an absolutely great place right now. Even Mazda as well, and Mazda Motors Mexico is also up as well, which Mazda is just absolutely killing it right now. So let's get into it right here. Starting off with the Mazda 3, we have a little bit of interesting results right here. The Mazda 3 is down just ever so slightly. Last year for the month of April, for both the hatchback and the sedan, they sold 2,619. This year right now we're at 2,537. So they are slightly down. And we can see here, this year the sedan did better than it did last year. However, the hatchback did better last year than it did this year. So we did have those numbers flip-flop there. It is a bit interesting to see that. Obviously, for the Mazda 6, we don't have a Mazda 6 in America anymore. Hopefully we get one, but we don't have one. So that's a 0 there. MX-5 sales, just like I showed when I was doing our Subaru sales, the BRZ is down. The MX-5 sales are down as well for the most part. They sold, 967 last year in the month of April. This year, they sold 861. So, like I said, also down there. We come to the CX-3. Obviously, that's a no more, so that's a 0. The CX-30, like I said, having that best ever, April. Huge growth at, 20.5%. Selling 7,649 vehicles compared to just under 6,000 last year. The CX-5 took a little bit of a dip. I do think it's quite interesting because the CX-5 is a very popular vehicle. It's one of Mazda's best sellers. I do think with the CX-50 growing a little bit, they that probably had something to do with it. But I do find it interesting that the CX-5 sales are down a little bit, selling 14,333 last year, and this year we're only at 11,149. So it is a bit interesting, that 22.2% change. For the CX-9, obviously, the CX-9 is no more, but they sold 3,311 last year. For the CX-50, like I said, we had a little bit of growth there, 21.4%, selling just a little bit over 4,300 last year. This year, we're already close to about 5,300. So we're seeing some good growth there. For the MX-30, it's gone. Didn't sell well. It was really only kind of like one of those, California compliance vehicles. They sold apparently 17 last year. We don't have any this year for April. For the, this model here, C70, all these, in America, we don't get these here. So for these numbers here, it's not really going to matter. For the CX90, we had huge growth. This is really positive because obviously we have the new CX70 coming out. So, with the CX70 being smaller and, should be a little bit cheaper as well. This is really positive growth to see. Last year, they sold under 1,000 at 845. This year, for the month of April, they sold 3,694. So that's a 337% increase. Really good to see that. In terms of Mazda sales total, For the cars, there was an increase of 5.2%, or I'm sorry, it was actually a decrease of 5.2%. But then for their trucks also as well, a very slight decrease as well for April sales. And then we can see here that totals to, the 3.8% total change from last year. They did a little bit better for the month overall. And then the average selling days was 27. So not too bad. Obviously, kind of ever since, COVID and things and all the shortages, we've been seeing those numbers, slowly get back up and up in terms of what dealer inventory is left and how long things were taking roughly to sell. So 27 isn't bad. It's still relatively, it's not like a long time, but it's not bad at all. For year-to-date sales, these are going to be a little bit more positive. So for the Mazda 3 year-to-date, even though April wasn't necessarily maybe the best month for them, they are still well up year-to-date. And they are well up in both categories. Combined, and whether we're looking at the sedan and hatchback, combined the Mazda 3 year-to-date is up 26.1%. Selling almost 10,000 last year, and right now we're one unit away from 12,500. So Mazda 3 sales as a whole still, despite the slow month of April, are still doing pretty well. Like I said, no Mazda 6. MX-5 sales are down. It's whichever way you look at it. I mean, these are not good numbers. MX-5 is just, it's a low volume seller. It's a halo vehicle. It gets you in the door, but you don't really, you may not buy the MX-5. You're probably buying maybe a Mazda 3, but you're more than likely buying a CX-5 or a CX-50 or something. So it's a halo vehicle. It gets you in the door, but, low figures down there. CX-3 is no more. CX-30, really strong growth with those month-to-date sales. Just selling 25,824 as of last year. Currently, right now, we're already at 36,145. It's a 40% increase. Huge increase for the CX-30, which is quite interesting to see because it is a small car, but it is more of a premium car than what it is. Competes with like the new the Dodge, the Hornet. Really interesting to see that. I quite like that car, the CX-30 as well. CX-5. We had slow sales for the month of April, and right now in our year-to-date sales, we're also seeing a bit slow sales. Last year we were at 53,060. Right now we're at close to 55,000, or 54 and a half, or I'm sorry, 45,000. We're at 45,494. So we're still a bit away from 50. It's a 14.3% decrease. We're almost at 45 and a half. But we're just a little bit away. Still kind of surprised with the CX-5 to see those figures be that way. Obviously, with the CX-90, or not the CX-90, the CX-9 discontinued model, we went from 13,000 to 3. That model's not really going to matter. CX-50, huge jumps, 50% sales, or 49.9 if we're being exact. Selling 14,069 last year. Currently this year we're already at 21,092, so huge growth for the CX-50. I do think too the CX-50 also, a lot of people love the CX-5 because it's built in Japan. I like it as well, but the CX-50, especially because it's built for the American market, here built in America, a little bit bigger, a little bit wider. In terms of, it has a little bit more capability in terms of towing at 3,500 pounds compared to the CX-5. I do think probably the CX-5 is stealing some sales from the CX-50 is stealing some sales from the CX-5, so that is responsible for the the loss and the gain here. It's going to be interesting to see what Mazda does with the CX-5 and the CX-50, how they're going to balance that. Are they going to keep them both in the lineup? What's going to happen there? So it's really interesting to see that. Obviously, the MX-30 is it's an anomaly. We've got a few anomalies here. CX-90, huge growth year to date. They only sold 1,132 last year. This year we're already at 13,678. That's over 1,000% growth. Really solid to see that, especially because with that new CX-70 coming out, built off the same platform. Sorry about that. Same power plants and things. The fact that we're seeing this much growth on this vehicle, the smaller vehicle being a little bit lighter, it's going to be a little bit cheaper. A little bit probably better, a little bit better on the gas and things. that's going to indicate some really strong sales there, and we'll see how those two vehicles cross compete with each other, being the third row and the non-third row. Just as we can see the CX-5 and the CX-50 are cross competing essentially with each other here, flipping the numbers here. And then year to date overall, Mazda is still up, selling close to 121,000 vehicles last year. Right now we're at 131,000 already and change. So that's an 8.7% increase, a 9% increase. So Mazda is still doing extremely well overall. Obviously the MX-5 is just bleeding money though right now. The Mazda 3 is still increasing, it's still making them money and it's growing, which is good to see. But the MX-5 is absolutely bleeding. But the real anomaly here, because the MX-5 is always going to be bleeding, and I think the Mazda 3 will slowly kind of level out, but it'll still continue to grow a little bit. SUV-wise, they're doing fine, but I think what's really going to be interesting, what the key for Mazda is here, what are they going to do with the CX-5 and the CX-50? Just because, I've always thought the CX-5 is... People like it because it's built in Japan. It is a little bit smaller. It feels a little bit more compact and a little bit more agile. And it's just a little bit on the smaller side. But, people love the CX-50. It's a little bit bigger, a little bit more headroom. You still get the same engine. Mazda quality is still very good, but the CX-50 being built in America, there are a lot of people who, love, and, patriotic, support American labor. And also, too, the CX-50 having a maximum capacity of 1,500 pounds towing versus with the CX-5, with the CX-50 you get, 3,500 pounds with the tow mode. So, the CX-50 does allow you to tow a very small, maybe fishing boat, maybe a PWC or two, depending on, the occupants in the vehicle and how big the PWCs are, but or even a very light, camping or travel trailer. The CX-50 does just give you a little bit more capability. It also does give you a more interesting stance. It is a little bit of a wider stance, and it also in the off-road side, it is a little bit better on the off-road side. So it's going to be pretty interesting. I think that's really going to be the big deciding factor. The CX-90 is going to do great. CX-70 I think is going to do even better. Mazda 3 I think will continue to, just be a solid car. It won't be a segment leader or anything, but it'll be a solid car that people like. The MX-5 is just going to continue to bleed cash. But really the big thing Mazda needs to figure out, just because the numbers for the CX-50 and the CX-5 flip-flopped and they're quite drastic, what is going to happen with the CX-5 and the CX-50? Is Mazda going to revamp the CX-5 and change it in a way so that way the CX-5 and the CX-50 are more distinct? Or is Mazda even just going to go away with the CX-50 entirely and just, decide that the CX-50 is better for the American market? So it's going to be a bit interesting to see what's going to happen there with that. We don't know what's going to happen, but that's really the only concern that I have for Mazda. Other than that, though, they're just down by 1,000 month to date, so it's not too bad. Obviously, you never want to go down, but that's not bad. This is still a strong result. Year to date, they're still growing in all markets, worldwide markets, including in Mexico. And they're not just, having strong sales with the new cars and the SUVs, but like I said, CPO with their certified pre-owned having another best ever April. If you're a Mazda dealer, you're doing great. You're selling a ton of new SUVs, you're selling just tons of new cars, and you're selling used cars as well. And that just also contributes here to the selling, the days of selling. Mazda vehicles, they have a pretty decent amount of of inventory, but then again, it's also not sitting there. So that's what you want to have as a dealer. You want to have just the right amount of inventory, but you also want to have it sell at a good time so you don't lose the equity. So yeah, Mazda as a whole, though, overall, they're absolutely doing great. They're absolutely killing it. Personally, I'm a big Mazda fan, Mazda owner. My dad still has his Mazda Tribute, over 20 years old, over 300,000 miles. I've always been a Mazda fan. I've always just thought, Mazda always made good-looking vehicles. They make some pretty, fun vehicles. They don't do the speeds anymore, but, they still have that new, with the inline six and then, the turbo that they have, the Skyactiv, 256 horsepower. They still make some engines that are, pretty spirited still. They're always really reliable. They usually feel more premium than they are. I always love to say Mazda's kind of like the Japanese VW, because Mazda always tends to come out with good looking cars with good amount of tech. Compared, like with the Germans, they don't, they're not like some of the other Japanese automakers where they let their cars sit there for 10, 15 years. But they give you nice, spirited powertrains, and they still make them very reliably. So I am personally a big Mazda fan. I'm not surprised by these sales figures. Mazda has always been a good brand, and they've been increasing year over year, especially it's been a while since Mazda was owned by Ford, and I also owned Ford Mazda vehicles. But obviously, ever since then as well, even though it's been a while, Mazda has still been continuing to get better and better, and with the help of Toyota and a few others in there, Mazda's just continued to grow. And I'm, as owning multiple Mazdas, former and still owning current Mazdas as well, I'm absolutely not surprised. So this is really, really great to see. Mazda is absolutely killing it right now. Obviously, this doesn't, Mazda has tried in the electrification space. The MX-30 kind of failed. It was a compliance vehicle. We do have with the new CX-90 and a CX-70, we're going to have the traditional hybrid and the plug-in hybrid. We know Mazda is a little bit more kind of conservative, especially with, full electrification. So it's going to be interesting to see there if we'll get anything out of that, what's going to happen to the portfolio-wise. But like I said, the big thing they have to worry about is just what are they going to do with the CX-5 and the CX-50. But that's going to be it, everyone. Let me know what you guys think. If you like the video, please let me know in the comments down below. Give a like on the video. If you subscribe to the channel, it really, really helps us out reach a bigger audience. And that's going to do it for now, everyone. Thanks for watching.